Let's look now at some of the election data that has come in. We're going to look at live at the IEC election data and where the parties stand at the moment. As you can see, the ANC is still sitting at the top there with just under 950,000 votes at 43.39%. The Democratic Alliance sitting at 24.83%, and the EFF sitting at 8.83%. But if you scroll down, it is really the smaller parties that aren't doing too well. You will see here on my screen that Rise Mzansi, Busa, as well as Hope for SA, all of these being new parties, seeming to not be able to get that momentum that will get them going. Rise Mzansi and Busa each sitting on 0.32% with just over 7,000 votes. Those are the actual results at the moment. But let's take a look at the predictive results. And this, of course, is based on a model put together by the CSIR. And I'm now joined by Professor Pravesh Debba, who's going to be walking us through some of these numbers. Prof, thank you so much for joining us. Really do appreciate it. We're sitting now, on our screen here, it shows 19.6% of the voting districts, but new results had just come in. The bell rang a few minutes ago, so this will update soon with just over 20% of the voting district. How significant a number of voting districts is that to help us with finality in terms of predictive? Again, the bell went, as you just heard it there. Some new results coming in there. How useful, how big a margin is that to help us with the predictive probability of the final outcome?
Thanks, Oliver. And just to mention that, the model we are using has been developed back in 1999. And since 2004, we have been in partnership with the SABC. So, we've been using this model for a long time now, with some changes, naturally.
So the core functions and the core coefficients of the model would have remained the same over the years. I'm assuming some of the changes are just the rapid addition of new political parties coming in, adding some level of volatility to the model. How do you mitigate for that generally?
Yeah, so obviously some of the changes that we have made to the model is more on the lines of seeing how to improve it to make it run faster, and so more on the computing side. We also looked at the clusters to see how to improve the way in which we cluster, so that when we assigning voting districts to the clusters, it can be the undeclared voting district can be predicted more accurately, that sort of thing. But obviously this year...
For the nerds listening out there, talk to us about the clustering using a method called the fuzzy semen clustering method. What does that mean in layman's terms?
I'll try to explain it in layman's terms. So basically what we are doing is we are using the 2019 national elections data. Because there are two assumptions that we make in order to develop this model, and both of them are related to voting behavior. So the one is that the way in which a person votes is dependent on or is influenced by the way he voted previously, and because of that we use the 2019 data to form clusters. So what a cluster is a group of voting districts that are most similar to each other,
right,
and most similar in the way in which they are voting. So like your results. So in other words, one voting district compared to another will have approximately the same percentage of people that voted for ANC, DA.
So it's not about
EFF.
the size of a voting district in a particular cluster. So
No.
small voting districts can behave in a similar situation, similarly to larger voting districts, and that mitigates to some extent for volatility in terms of large numbers coming in and swaying and biases, I'm assuming?
Correct. Right. So once we are able to form that 20 clusters, we then come into the new elections. And as a voting district is being declared, we look at how the relationship of that voting district to the 20 clusters, and we assign a probability to each of the 20 clusters. And because of that, voting districts that have not been declared we use our second assumption that the way in which people vote, they tend to vote as a group.
Right.
So if there's a change in the cluster if there's a change from one cluster to another, they sort of move in groups.
You sort of see that change translate over. Let's look at some of the results coming out, right? Your predictive model tells us right now that the ANC is sitting, I just wanted to the viewers, the green bar means that's the actual result that is currently on the board, and the blue bar means that's the result predicted by the CSIR model. Your model has predicted 41.8% for the ANC with 19.6% of the voting districts in. It means your margin of error is in a fairly confident zone of between 0 and 2%, right?
Correct.
To what extent do you see the ANC swaying away from that? If we add 2% to that, it means the highest possible outcome according to your model for the ANC is 43.8%.
That's correct.
Yeah. Talk to us about what's happening with the MK Party and the Patriotic Alliance, because there we see a bigger difference between the projected and the actual.
Yes, that's correct. So with regards to the MK, firstly, we must understand that MK is a new party, and the CSIR election prediction model has in the past struggled to predict for new parties. It's not always the case. For example, in 2009, when COPE came in, then the CSR model was able to quite accurately predict for COPE. But in 2014, when EFF was first contesting, we had a margin of error that was close to 2%.
Right.
So it all depends, and there's reasons for it.
Let's look at what's happening, Professor, in specifically in some of the provinces. I want us to go over to Gauteng, because Gauteng is one of those provinces that's quite volatile, and here we have to be quite sensitive to those levels of volatility. The ANC sitting there on 35.4% according to your prediction. The actual result is lower than what you predicted, so it means that the ANC could still potentially pick up quite a bit. The Democratic Alliance sitting there on 26.8% according to your prediction. MK again making big waves in Gauteng with 10% over there. Talk us through some of the Gauteng behavior, the behavior of the numbers here in Gauteng. Have you seen something like this before?
I must say this is quite unusual in terms of the numbers, but at the same time, during the municipal elections, Action SA, for example, performed quite well for city of Joburg and city of Pretoria and so on. So you can see that they are getting quite a support, but I think what could be quite surprising is MK having what we are predicting for Gauteng is that they would get about 10% of the vote, but here again we are just over 15% of the voting districts declared. So, our margin of error is probably around 2% as well.
Around 2%. I want us to just lastly take a look at the Western Cape. The Western Cape, also quite an interesting situation. You projected and predicted 54% for the Democratic Alliance over there. 35.2% of that's a really high number of voting districts declared. What's the level of confidence there about these projections?
Yes, I think here we can be quite confident with the Western Cape, with the margin of error. I think it will start to settle down around these figures.
Yeah. Now, the big caveat here, and where the numbers yet aren't at a stage where we can trigger a level of confidence, is KwaZulu-Natal. I want us to take a look at the actuals in KwaZulu-Natal. Those numbers there are quite interesting because in KZN, for instance, my screen is just not bringing that up at the moment. But if we do scroll up here, we're able to find KwaZulu-Natal over here and look at some of those numbers over there. What we see in KZN is that they are just just over 11% of the completed voting districts over there, and the MK party there is leading by 43.48%. The ANC trailing behind, they're sitting on 21.38%. With such a big volatility on the numbers, one has to be really careful when it comes to that projection. Talk to us about what the variables are at play in the predictability here.
So firstly, we must realize that there's only 11% of the voting district that has been...
It's not a lot.
Yes, it's not a lot. We would prefer that there's between 15 to 20% of the voting district declared before, we normally release our predictions for the province. Now, if you look at KZN, there's a lot of factors here. One is MK is a new party, so we have to take that into account. But as you can see, they are sitting quite high with 43%. With regards to ANC, if one is to look at the voting districts, okay, for ANC, currently they are sitting at just over 21%. Now, these voting districts that make up this 21% for ANC, if we have to look at the same voting districts that were declared in 2019, at that time ANC was 55%.
Yeah, we're going to continue looking at these numbers, Prof. Debba. Really do appreciate it.